Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Dave Lubin to the show. We are continuing our series entitled The Best Year in Music. Tonight we are looking at 1978. We will be picking our top 10 favorite albums from that year, so let's get started.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight Dave Lubin is back. We are continuing our series of the best years in music. Now, you might chuckle. You go, well, Grant, you and Dave have been picking these years. There's a whole bunch of years of the best years. Well, it's hard to narrow it down. And we like all these years. We're doing the peak years in music for us. So tonight we're going to tackle 1978. So we've picked 10 albums that we're just going to share. We're going to keep it loose like we always do here in the warehouse and talk about 10 albums that we really love. Now, I must say that 1978 is really when I started, 75 is when I started to really pay attention, but 78, there were a lot of records in 1978 when I was a kid that I heard and still have made a big impression on me in my old age. So this was pretty easy for me because I just went through the list. I'm going, oh yeah, that. When I was, however old I was in 78, it was like a big deal, and it's still a big deal. So anyway, Dave Lubin's back. Dave, how are you? Nice to see you. You ready to talk?
I'm doing great.
Ready to talk 1978?
I'm ready to talk 1978. And, it's interesting. When we started this series, I thought, hey, 81 was the best year. And then as we're starting to go backwards, I'm starting to say, you know what? I think I was a bit hasty there. 81, I think, was what I kind of considered the last really great year of that pure rock music that I grew up with, because then the music started changing somewhat. Mm-hmm. But as we're going backwards, I'm thinking, you know what? I don't know. There's some great albums, so I'm ready to go. I've got some great albums to talk about with you tonight.
Well, we've got 10. We'll do an hour. We should be all right. Do you want to? Now I can't remember how we usually do it. Do we just do one, or we do a couple? What did we do last time?
I think last time we went 10, 9, 8, 7. I ranked mine.
Just do 1, 1. You do 1, I do 1. We'll go back.
You want to do 1? Okay, we'll do like that.
That's fine. All right. Well, I didn't rank mine. I'm just going to list them, but I'll start out with my number 10 just so I can keep track of what I'm doing. So, but all of these, I love all these albums, but I'm looking through my list. Yeah, there might be some that I might like. Well, I like a lot of these. They're like all my children. I can't really pick just one, but I love all these records still. All right. So go ahead. Give us your number 10.
All right. I'll start off. My number 10, Lynyrd Skynyrd's First and Last. So in 1977, the band Lynyrd Skynyrd tragically died in an airplane crash. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the main singer, Ronnie Van Zant, he passed, and so did Steve Gaines, one of their 3 guitarists. However, a lot of the band did survive, and as we talked about in the last show, they did come up with the Rossington Collins Band. But in 1978,
Rossington Collins is good.
That was a solid, good album. Mm-hmm. But so is this, and I had a lot of trouble for my number 10. I was kind of going back and forth between Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight, and this one. I went with this one. What this one is a bunch of old demos. So if you think about their debut album, mm-hmm. that was a fantastic debut album. And they had a lot of leftover songs that didn't make the cut. So that's what this is. Now, ironically, this is the only album that featured Ricky Medlock. Now, why is that ironic? Because Ricky Medlock is now the only one who is still alive and appearing with the band. So there is one other surviving member, Artemis Pyle, played drums on Street Survivors and a couple of other albums. But Ricky Medlock actually wrote a fantastic song on this album called White Dove. It sounds a little different than typical Lynyrd Skynyrd stuff. So you can see that with Ricky Medlock, the band might have had a little bit of a different direction. There's some other great songs on this album. There's one called Was I Right or Wrong? It's a Van Zant ballad about him becoming a rock star. He disobeys his parents, and when he comes back to tell them, hey, he made it, he finds that they were dead in the grave. I don't believe it's a true story, but it's a great it's a great song.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about that song, when you listen to it, it's got a riff that sounds very Gimme 3 Steps like. It also has a bit of a gospel thing going on in it, so it's a great song. There's a lot of other good songs. The very first song on the album was called Down South Junkin'. Sounds very Skynyrd like. I'm surprised that never made the cut. They have another version of a song called Things Going On, which was on the debut album, and you just get to hear another version. And what they did was they actually re-released this album many years later and played some other demos of songs in their original format, and that included Freebird. I actually like this album better than some of the ones that they put out prior to Street Survivors. Like, I never thought much of Nothing Fancy or Give Me Back My Bullets. Actually, neither did Ronnie Van Zant, if you ever watched the special on Netflix about him. This album, because of the demand for Lynyrd Skynyrd after they had passed in that tragedy, it did reach number 15 on Billboard, was a platinum album, and I think I think you'd enjoy it. If anybody doesn't have it, it's a great choice.
All right, cool. Excellent. Good way to start out, Dave. I like it. All right, my number 10, which is not necessarily my number 10, but I just kind of listed them, and I love all of these equally. Like I said, I'm going to go with Styx Pieces of 8 from 1978, the 8th studio album. This is one of those records where everybody looks at it and think it's one of their best albums. I have to agree. I would probably rank Grand Illusion up there in front of it, but this continues on like what they had already started. Grand Illusion came out in 77. Phenomenal. So is Pieces of 8. I love everything on it. This album reached number 6 on the Billboard 200. And it's been certified triple platinum. Now, I don't know the last time it was certified again, but it was one of their most commercially successful records. I don't think this record sounds all that commercial, not like the stuff that came later on, but it's all right. Album starts out with Great White Hope, James Young song. Now, if anybody's followed Styx, you know James Young sang a lot of the tracks in that wooden nickel era. Then when they got Tommy Shaw in, well, James didn't sing quite so much. But when you have a Tommy Shaw in the band, you kind of let Tommy do what he's doing since he's absolutely brilliant. But you've got Great White Hope, James Young song starts it off great. I'm Okay, Dennis DeYoung song. You know, it's very uplifting. It's just great organ work on it. Phenomenal. Sing for the Day, Tommy Shaw. Acoustic-driven song, kind of like Fooling Yourself, but not quite. But there's great songs. This is also the album that's got Blue Collar Man and Renegade on it. Two of the hardest, greatest Tommy Shaw tracks as far as I'm concerned. And also, it's also got a Dennis DeYoung song called Queen of Spades, which to me is very much like Miss America that was on Equinox. Great. I like the whole record. You can't go wrong with this whole period of Styx. Just get Grand Illusion and Pieces of 8 and you should be good to go. Though I like the later stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. But I think 1978 was like perfect because after this, their sound changed with Cornerstone. I like Cornerstone, but it's a little bit more sterile sounding. This sounds very analog to me, unlike Cornerstone and Pieces of 8 and Kilroy. There's something missing with the sound, but still good songs. So anyway, that's my number 10. Gary, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think we're we're probably gonna match up on some of our choices tonight because I'll be coming back around to that one.
Okay, cool.
But I got a higher rank than you do.
Well, it's not my number 10.
Yeah,
I'm not in order. I'm just listing them as I kind of slapped them together. So,
well, you know what? You brought it up, so let's just talk about it now.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about it.
I'll just make a couple of comments about it. So, yeah, I have that actually ranked as my 5th favorite album of that year, but it's really the one that got me made me a fan of Styx. So it's actually not my favorite Styx album.
Mm-hmm.
It's my favorite would be Grand Illusion, and probably Paradise Theater would be second. So this probably would be my 3rd favorite. But yeah, some of my favorite songs on the album are Queen of Spades, Blue Collar Man, and I actually quite like the title track, Pieces of 8. One comment I wanted to make about this particular album and the song Renegade. When you hear Renegade, what's other famous song do you think of? I consider this an Americanized version of a song that a British band did.
Is this a band? Would this be a track that came later or before?
Before. It doesn't sound like it, but the plot is almost the exact same.
I don't know. You got me. What is it?
To me, Renegade is an Americanized version of Bohemian Rhapsody. It is the same plot. Even starts off with him confessing to his mama. And yet it's one of those things that for some reason I find it to be true. I've looked it up on the internet to look for other people, and occasionally I find someone who sees the comparison. I see it. I don't know. It's something that never gets talked about. Maybe that's my thing. Don't know. Anyway.
Good point. I don't know. Yeah. Let us know down in the comments. We want to hear what you think of that. Because
great song, by the way.
Great song.
And I'm not suggesting that they copied Styx in terms of how it sounds musically. It sounds very different. I'm just saying lyrically, the plot is very similar.
Right.
So should I go to my next one?
Yeah, why not? Go ahead. Do your next one, then I'll do mine.
Well, first time in one of these shows that I've got the boss. I've got Darkness at the Edge of Town.
Look at you.
Yeah, first time. For me, if I go to a Bruce Springsteen concert, here's what I want to hear him play. This entire album, the entire Born to Run album. I'd also like him to play Sherry Darling, From the River, play Streets of Philadelphia, and I'm good. Because I basically like every single song on this album. My favorite being Candy's Room. I'm also quite a huge fan of Prove It All Night, Badlands, Adam Raised a Cain. Fantastic album. And just in terms of how this album did, it peaked at number 5 on Billboard. And it was it's a Bruce Springsteen album. Obviously critics loved it.
I think Candy's Room is the best track on it, and the guitar solo on that's just absolutely scorching.
Yeah, that build up to that song is just excellent.
It's good. I have to give you that. I'm not a big Springsteen guy, but a while ago I pulled out Born to Run, the CD of it. I thought, let me just listen to it. Let me just sit down and just quit being negative and just listen to it. And I have to admit, Born to Run's a pretty damn good record, and I can understand all the good reviews. It's a really perfect record, and I think Darkness is right on the heels of Born to Run. It's kind of like Styx Pieces of 8 to Grand Illusion. Same kind of analogy.
I as I said, for me, I don't know what it was after this album. It's not that I thought his stuff was bad, but I don't know. I never really had that desire after this album to go and run out and buy The River or Born in the USA or any of those. It's a
different animal by that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
My number 9.
Number 9. That's good. All right. My number 9, again, I didn't put them in order. We're just listening them. I'm listing them. God, I can't talk, Dave. I'm listing them, just listing them. All right, so we're in 1978, but I will have to say this might be one of my favorite albums of 1978 because it is a classic. I loved it when I was a kid. I love it now. I might love it even more. I'm going to go with Cheap Trick Heaven Tonight. Came out in May of 78. A lot of people, when they rank them, this is always thought of being the top of the heap. I cannot argue that it's my top of the heap, but it's just a powerhouse album. You've got wonderful Tom Werman production, got power pop, hard rock, catchy melodies, everything you want in a Cheap Trick album is here. Surrender. This is the album, ladies and gentlemen, that has Surrender on it. So that's a power pop anthem if there is one. For catchy chorus, it was actually a top 40 hit. You would have thought it could have gotten higher, but it only got to 62 on the charts, Billboard charts. On Top of the World's a great song, almost glam rock to some degree. On Top of the World, one of my favorite songs, and actually, Everything Works If You Let It is a rewrite of On Top of the World. Rick Nelson Rick Nielsen just took the chord progression and flipped it upside down. Great stuff. California Man is a move cover. Phenomenal. Boogie Woogie, it's great. High Roller, Auf Wiedersehen, Taking Me Back, On the Radio, Heaven Tonight has got what a wonderful atmospheric, almost druggy, atmospheric type imagery, eerie atmosphere, somber lyrics. You've got what can I say? Absolute classic. Stiff Competition. How Are You? Eau Claire rounds it out. Unbelievable. This is, like I said, this is considered a classic, and it would probably be my number one if I'm going to really rank it, because I do love this record. So
yeah, this one for me, it just missed. It was kind of interesting with this particular album. When they put it out, they thought this was going to be the one that was going to kind of break them out in the United States. But it was a few months later when the bootleg of Budokan came out, and that was the one that kind of took Cheap Trick to that whole other level. And I'm not sure, but am I correct in saying that Surrender on the Budokan album might have been a top 40 hit? So in other words, it wasn't a top 40 hit when it came out initially, but
I don't know if they released it. I know they just released, I don't think they released that as a single.
Because I feel like I heard that all the time in the live version, not this version.
Yeah, because, a lot of those Cheap Trick live tracks are like, people think those are the definite versions. Because let's think about it. Cheap Trick's a live band. It was hard to capture them live in the studio, though I thought Tom Werman was able to do it, and I think Jack Douglas was able to do it until he failed on Standing on the Edge, and that's a whole other topic. Standing on the Edge could have been a great record had Jack Douglas followed through, but he was in litigation with Yoko, a lot going on then, and Tony Platt, I think, pretty much handled it, and I'm not a fan of Tony Platt at all. But anyway,
I always quite like the All Shook Up one. I don't know.
Yeah, All Shook Up. It still sounds like Cheap Trick.
Yeah, no, I really quite like. Actually, Stop This Game has always been one of my favorite Cheap Trick songs.
But when I was a kid, that's where the cracks started to form for us. Because when that came out, we listened to it and go, "Uh-oh, something's off." I look back now on it and I love it. But when I was a kid, there was a definite drop off in quality. And we couldn't put our finger on it, but we could hear it. So I don't think the songwriting's quite up to some of it. Yeah, Stop the Game's great. There are certain tracks that are good. Some of them almost sound like Cheap Trick's trying to be Cheap Trick. It's a whole other show. I'm not going to go down that road, but I like it now compared to what came later. So, but they did have that golden period,
Yeah, you were talking about like how they sound different as a live act. So you think about on Budokan, if you listen to I Want You to Want Me on the live at Budokan versus the In Color album, the songs almost sound like two different songs. I mean, in Color,
they totally did a different
pace.
Arrangement.
Yeah, and
Totally
I think that one. I think that had to have been a hit from the live album. I think
that was one of their biggest hits. But I think when they recorded it in the studio, I mean, I think that morphed into what it became on Budokan just from going out playing it. Some of these songs, some of these bands and artists have these tracks and they play them so much that they morph into something else.
Elton John loves doing that. He loves messing around with the songs.
I like to hear the way it really supposed to be.
Well, actually, in this case, if I Want You to Want Me, I like the live version better. But it's just
sure.
But it's probably because I heard it that way first. So
of course, I don't have a problem with the In Color version, but it's different. They had a different scope when they recorded it, and it just morphed into something else when they played it live. So, what's your next one?
My next one is Toto's debut album. I have a feeling it's going to be on yours too.
It's not.
It's not. Interesting. Okay, because I know you've done a show on Toto. So on a previous show, I actually identified Hydra, as being one of my favorite albums of that particular year, and it was this one was one of my favorite albums of this particular year. They came shooting out of a cannon with a huge hit with their debut album, and then they had to wait till their fourth album to have a similar type of hit. As a matter of fact, the fourth album was even bigger than this one, that being Toto 4. But Hold the Line was a massive hit, and that basically anchored this to being a platinum selling album. Hold the Line hit number 5, and this album sold 2 million copies. My two favorite songs on this particular album, my favorite is Girl Goodbye, and I think you're going to find my second favorite interesting. I like the opening song, Child's Anthem, which leads into I'll Supply the Love, because I really think it shows the band. This is the Toto is previous to being Toto, were a number of very successful session musicians, and it just basically shows the talent that they had in that band. So
Right.
that's my number 8.
All right. Cool. Excellent. No, I didn't choose that.
Oh, I was expecting. Okay.
Well, I'm just going through them, and it's the way it comes up. All right. This is the band that I saw back on this tour in 78. I think this was my first concert. My parents took my buddy and I to this. I'm going to go with Foreigner Double Vision, came out in June of 78. Big commercial success. To me, it's just a continuation of that first album. I could take the first album and Double Vision and just mix them up, and I don't think I could really tell much difference. But I like it. I love it. Keith Olsen's production, I have no problem with it. I think Mick Jones' guitar tone on this sounds great. The songs are good. It's just one of those albums that when I was a kid, it made a big impression, and I can't get over it. It still has a big impression. This album, you had Hot Blooded, which was a top 5 hit. Everybody knows that. Peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Lou Gramm sounds great on this record. There is not a moment when Lou Gramm doesn't sound good, but he sounds great. Blue Morning, Blue Day is a killer song. This also was a single, reached number 15. You're All I Am kind of shows that soft rock edge for them. It's great. There's not a bad track on this record. There's no sophomore slump here. Back Where You Belong. Oh my God. Lou Gramm's vocals, Mick Jones' guitar, wonderful. Keyboards are wonderful. Love Is Taking Its Toll's great. You've got the title track, Double Vision. This was also a single, reached number 2 on the Billboard chart. Everybody should know Double Vision. Powerful hard rock, catchy chorus, everything. It checks all my boxes. I could keep going on, but yeah, I think you get the idea. But I think at the time, I think this got fairly good reviews. I'm sure Rolling Stone hated it. They hated everything. But it eventually went 7 times platinum. One of the best-selling records of the 70s. They were on top of the world at this point. But I still love Double Vision. I love all that material with the original band, Everything, I like everything up. Well, I don't mind Foreigner 4 at all. But, Head Games and Previous, I love all those records. So there you go. That's my whatever number that is. 8.
When I prepare for these shows, I look in Wikipedia and I have to really look, and I go, okay, and I really try to carefully go through every single album that was released. And I have to say, this one, it escaped me, because this one should be in my top 10. So I'm glad you picked it, because
right.
it was a miss. It was just a miss. All right, my next one, my number 7 is a band that I know you still haven't had the opportunity to listen to, but I'm going back to Prism. I talked about them on another show. This is a Canadian band based out of Vancouver. Jim Vallance was very involved with this band pretty much throughout their inception. And this was their second album. So you talk about a band that Rolling Stone hates. I remember back in the day buying a Rolling Stone. They rated all the records, and they basically just panned this band, they described them as a smidgen of Yes, dab of Genesis. They are very synthesizer based. There's no doubt about that. But Canadians, for the most part of our generation, they love them. I've actually seen sometimes when I watch your show as an audience member, they tend to get mentioned from time to time.
Mhm.
I brought them up from time to time, and I think it was Armageddon. I had Armageddon on another list. This particular album did have a song that actually charted on the Billboard charts. It got all the way to number 58. It was called Flying. Again, it's a very synthesizer-based song. It's still played quite a bit on Canadian rock radio today. And this whole album is filled with those catchy synthesizer songs. Ron Tabak has an excellent rock and roll voice. He can also sing a ballad quite well. So lots of good songs on this album. I talked about Flying. The title track is like if you like synthesizer, it's like a real synthesizer song.
Yeah.
And the name of the name of their keyboardist is John Hall. He's great at the synthesizer. Some other great songs on this album: Nickels and Dimes. The opener, Hello, is a nice, it's kind of like Cheap Trick, and we talked about, has their Hello There album, Hello There song that they do to open up the show. They actually don't use this one to open the show. They might have used it for this particular tour. And oh, by the way, speaking of Cheap Trick, when they came to Montreal in 1979, they were part of a 3-band bill. So there was Prism, Cheap Trick, and Graham Parker. Cheap Trick was actually was the lead act, but you got a 3-for-1 at the Montreal Forum.
Nice.
There's also 2 really good rock ballads on this album. It's You're Like the Wind and You're My Reason. So for the Canadians who watch this show, they probably know it. For the Americans, something to look up.
Yeah, because I think they only had the one. They only had the one hit here in the States, I think. All right, my number 7. I'm going to go with another one of those records from when I was a kid that I absolutely love. 6th studio album. We're going to Canada today, right now. 6th studio album came out October '78. Going to go with Hemispheres from Rush. We're still in that prog mode. We kind of get rid of the prog. There's some prog on Permanent Waves, but not quite as much. But I think this is, fits really well in there between 2112, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, like a trilogy. Come on. It's you've got Sweets on here. You got Cygnus X1 Book 2. Apps picks up where Book 1 left off on A Farewell to Kings. I could go into it, but everybody should probably know Rush. But you do have a couple of tracks that are a little bit more accessible, like Circumstances, which is a lot more straightforward. It kind of gives a glimpse to what's coming ahead. Great guitar work by Alex Lifeson. It's still complex. It's still dense. It's still great. The Trees, probably my favorite song on the record, which is talking about social classes in terms of the trees with the maples and the oak trees. It's good. It's fucking great.
I have to laugh because whenever I think of the song "The Trees," so back when we were of that age, things you were allowed to do then you were not supposed to be doing then. But when we were doing those things then, you would listen to a song like "The Trees" and just sort of like. Go, oh my God, this is just the most brilliant thing ever. But The Trees is actually my favorite Rush song.
Yeah, it's mine too. Pretty damn close. All right. So the record ends with La Vita Strangiato at 9 minutes, 36 seconds. It's an instrumental. It's the Rush instrumental of instrumentals, as far as I'm concerned. A classic. Again, when this came out, I don't think Rolling Stone was too hip to it, but now it's considered one of their best records. It only got to 47 on the chart. I don't know. Rush really didn't sell a whole lot, but man, you cannot deny that they have a huge fan base. So that would be my number 7, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because my next one will be number 6. So.
All right, carry on.
All right, I'll carry on. This one could almost be a greatest hits album, and that's Bob Seger, "Stranger in Town." So listen to what songs are on this particular album. It's got "We've Got Tonight," "Still the Same," "Old Time Rock and Roll," and "Hollywood Nights." So how's that for a foursome?
Can't complain about that.
Yeah, all four of those are still played a ton today on classic rock radio stations everywhere. And some of those songs are iconic. I mean, you think about old time rock and roll, you've got the famous scene in Risky Business. I remember learning how to play Guitar Hero, let's say about 12, 14 years ago, and loved playing Hollywood Nights on Guitar Hero. This album did fantastic. It only had one of those songs was the Still the Same was the only one to reach the top 10 on Billboard, but two more were top 15, and Old Time Rock and Roll hit number 28. But the album itself peaked at number 4, sold 6 million copies. And yeah, I mean, this is the second show in a row I talked about Bob Seger.
Excellent. All right. Cool. I guess I'm at my number 6. All right. I'm going to go with all these I'm pulling from my youth. I can't help it because I still love them. This, to me, is probably the last great album from this band. And again, this is another show, but I consider this the last great album. Came out November 78. We're talking about the band Queen and the album Jazz. One of the memories I remember back in the day is going to Musicland, and there were tons of cutouts of Jazz in the bins. Because I'm not exactly sure how this sold. I don't think it sold all that well, but I think this is Queen at the height of their creative powers. We've got, albums like Night at the Opera. We've got News of the World. We got Day at the Races. Top-notch stuff. Roy Thomas Baker's back for this one and produced it. Fat Bottom Girls, Bicycle Races on here. If you can't beat them, Let Me Entertain You, Dead on Time. Oh, Fun It. This is like one of the last albums. Well, The Game actually is pretty much where they would all take vocals. You had a Roger Taylor song. Okay, Roger Taylor song. Guess who's going to sing it? Roger Taylor. You've got a Brian May composition. Guess who's going to sing it? Oh, Brian May. Eventually became the Freddie Mercury show. I'm not complaining. It is what it is. But I loved it when Queen they were individuals and whoever wrote the song would sing it. So to me, this is the last great Queen album before The Game, where things started to fall apart. We covered that show on look at the links down below where the show is called When the Cracks Start to Form. Check that out. Anyway, so that would be my number 6.
Yeah, they went to a more pop-heavy type of sound, even with
Disco.
The Game they did. Yeah,
well, Disco had a lot of different stuff on it.
They tried some disco. Well, of course, another one, Bites the Dust, was the famous disco song.
Right.
But when rock groups would do disco, I tended to like those disco songs more. When I think about songs like Another One Bites the Dust, and in another show we had talked about Wings doing Good Night Tonight. So I did like those. Okay, yeah. I think tonight even though now I live in Ohio, I think I'm following CRTC rules and going with the 30% Canadian content rule. Now, my number 4, I normally would not pick a greatest hits, but there are special circumstances with this one. So this is an album from a group called Trooper, and this is their greatest hits album. Now, first of all, if you notice, I've got signatures on it, and that's because I saw Trooper, and they were playing close to my house. I'd say about 10 or 15 minutes from where I lived, in an auditorium, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna be staying behind and signing." And I actually had my wife stall them so that I could run back to my house, go get this album, bring it back, and so that I could get them to sign it. So both Ray McGuire and Brian Smith, both still part of the band. This was maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. They signed it. I talked to them about the band, and so. As I mentioned, I don't typically like to include greatest hits when we do this, but this is a special case because this album, for people who are in my age range, it's an absolute must to be part of your collection if you're a Canadian. Mm-hmm. Up to that point, it was the best-selling album ever by a Canadian artist of any sort. Now, obviously, since then, they've been lapped by people like Alanis Morissette and Celine Dion and Avril Lavigne. They've obviously sold much more than that, but they sold about 400,000 or 500,000 copies of this album in Canada alone.
Wow.
There was only one song that really did anything in the United States. It was a song called Raise a Little Hell. I do occasionally still hear that song. I hear it on Sirius classic rock station occasionally. I've heard it at sporting events. I've heard it at Buffalo Bills games. But there's tons of great songs in this particular album. I mean, there's a great ballad on it called "Two for the Show," and basically what these are is it's a lot of kind of fun rock songs with very silly lyrics. Songs like "The Boys in the Bright White Sports Car," "General Hand Grenade," and then another anthem of Canada is a song called "We're Here for a Good Time, Not a Long Time." If I have one problem with this album, is that same year they had an album release called "Flying Colors" that had two other great Trooper songs, including my favorite called "Three Dressed Up as a Nine." I love that song, and unfortunately it's not on the original album. I think eventually they started releasing copies that had that particular song on it, and they had another great song on that particular album called "Janine." So if somebody's interested in Trooper, you might be better off to get just a flat out greatest hits package to make sure that you have those two songs. But still, I definitely wanted to, just let people know that this was my fourth favorite of that year. I might never pick another greatest hits when we do a show like this again, but for this particular one, I hope you don't mind.
All right, cool. Hey, I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any Trooper. I only know the one song.
Raise a Little Hell.
That's the one that got played.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. My number 5, I'm going to go with, again, like I said, I didn't really rank them, but it's got to keep track somehow. I'm going to go with the album that came out June 6, 1978. Often regarded as one of the greatest debut albums of all time. And this record and the record that followed up, I think, are like carbon copies, and you could just mix them up and I'd be happy. But it's new wave, and it's probably, well, when I was a kid, this is probably the first new wave thing that I ever heard, and it really stood out from what was out at the time. And I'm talking about the debut album from the Cars. Roy Thomas Baker production. Yep. This is all in that same era. I don't know which came first, Queen Jazz or this, but doesn't matter. But talk about good songwriting and talk about great vocals, great harmonies. I have to give Roy Thomas Baker credit for that. I mean, working with Queen, and he knows how to do it. Good Times Roll opens the album. It's an anthem. It's a Cars signature song. It's great. Goes into My Best Friend's Girl, power pop classic, little bit of a rockabilly feeling in it. It got to 35 on the charts. Great. This is the album that's got just what I needed on here. Top 40 hit, got to number 27. But if you think new wave, just what I needed just kind of checks the box for me. I think it's great. You got great songs. You're All I Got Tonight. Bye Bye Love, which has Benjamin Orr singing. Oh, I love all the Benjamin Orr sung tracks. Moving in Stereo, all mixed up. Absolutely phenomenal. Got to number 18, like I said. It's great. It's new wave. I mean, if you get to those first 3 Cars albums, I think you're pretty safe in that new wave territory. So, Dave, that's my number 5. What do you got? What's your next one?
Okay, so just quickly, I will tell you that the Cars were my number 2, that debut album. So obviously, I love that album as well.
You can tag team, and you can talk about it if you want. Just go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, I'll just actually just 2 things I'll add about this album is first of all, there are some people who call this album the Cars' greatest hits because practically everything was played on AOR radio back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I kind of want to point out about this album, me also being a movies guy, you can't ever forget the moving in stereo scene with Phoebe Cates and Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh yeah, classic scene. I'll just leave it at that.
But anyway, yeah, Cars debut. I mean, the first 3 Car albums, I mean, those 3 things were so good. I mean, so was Shake It Up, so was Heartbeat City. I mean, they were all, Cars were just on. They were on. There's
not really a weak album. You may have an argument that they're weaker, but I even like Door to Door. I don't really have a problem with that record. It's a bit of an outlier, but I don't have a problem with it. But Heartbeat City is way different than the debut or Candio or any of them. They're all different. Where I think the debut and Candio are very similar.
Well, the first, certainly for the first three, I can almost shake them up per se. And you know, depending on what mood I'm in. But in the last show we did, I said Panorama was my favorite album of that year, and this debut album was my second favorite of that year. So I'm going to talk about number three now.
Okay.
I'm going to go with what I think is Billy Joel's best album. It's my favorite. Now, the last one I had Glass Houses, and it was in, I think, the top 5 or something like that. 52nd Street, he sold 7 million copies of this thing. It was number 1 on Billboard for a number of weeks. There's so many great Billy Joel songs on this album. First of all, he's got upbeat, moderate rockers that were huge hits for him on this, My Life and Big Shot, and those are just songs that anytime they play, I'm always happy to hear them. But there's all kinds of great, deeper tracks, if you want to call them. It's Billy Joel, so all these things there's nothing that's that deep a track, but I think about songs like Rosalinda's Eyes, Stiletto, Zanzibar, Half a Mile Away. And I think with the exception of Half a Mile Away, I've heard all of I've seen Billy Joel 3 times, and I've heard him play almost all these songs at one time in between those 3 concerts. The first one I saw, he might have played Half a Mile Away. I can't really remember. I did get called out by one of your listeners on the last show for choosing Glass Houses, but I say that listener, tough luck. I like Billy Joel, and I think this album's great. I actually considered this one or The Cars for number 1. I'll get to my number 1 on the next one.
All right, cool. Well, my next one, I'm going to go with an album. There is a theme here, Dave, because all these records just took me by storm when I was a kid. I'm going to go with the first Dire Straits album, 1978. You've got the guitars, just the Stratocaster sounds on this record, the interplay between Mark and his brother David, incredible. Pick Withers drums. Oh, they never quite sounded like this again because, you know, they were one of those backs that constantly evolved, but this is just pure guitar, jangly Strat sounds, blended rock, blues, jazz influences, produced by Muff Winwood, Steve Winwood's brother. What can I say? This has starts out with Down to the Waterline, dynamic, vivid, great track, Water of Love, bluesy track. You got Sultans of Swing on here, which is what dropped me in. I remember going to Peaches in Columbus, Ohio on Morris Road and buying this in 78 and had my parents drive me there to get it because Sultans of Swing was great. If you were a kid learning to play guitar, this is one of those records you listen to and you go, wow, how's he doing that? Because it's very intricate. And Mark Knopfler's guitar player is great. Has one of the greatest guitar solos in history, I'd say. But I like the whole record. Everything flows well. Great songwriting, great production. It's a perfect record. It is where it is. I mean, it's not, I didn't rank them again, like I said, but I think it's still a great album. And out of a lot of great albums from Dire Straits. So that's my next one.
All right, so I'm actually up to my number 1 because we talked about a number of my albums which you had brought up. I'm just curious, can you guess what it is? I think you can.
Let's see. We're talking 1978.
Yeah. Well, I thought you'd be able to guess this.
I was thinking that, but I did not know that was going to be your number 1.
Yeah, no, this is going to be my number 1 for that year. So I was already a big April Wine fan, but finally they got a major U.S. label to carry them in the States. However, it took over a year till this album actually made any noise in the States. Now, we've talked about this album quite a bit on all the April Wine shows we did, but there are 2 covers for this album. This is the Canadian cover. There's an American cover which has a picture of the band, and the other thing they do in the American version is they flip-flop the first 2 songs. So this album leads off with Hot on the Wheels of Love, and then Get Ready for Love is the second album. The rest of it is the same. I actually like the American version leading off with Get Ready for Love because I just think that's a better song to lead off with.
I agree.
But anyway, as I mentioned, it took over a year till finally this album got some notice, and it was Roller, was a top 40 hit in April of 1979. I still don't know why Roller is not a song that's a staple on American classic rock radio. I have never heard that song ever here in Cleveland. Some other great songs on this album coming right. So two of my favorite when we did our tribute to Miles Goodwin, we picked our top 5 favorites. So two of them were on this album. So one of them is Roller. The other one is Coming Right Down on Top of Me. But this album is just filled with great songs like Silver Dollar, the aforementioned Get Ready for Love. It's got a great Greenway song on it called Right Down to It. And Let Yourself Go is another good one. Actually, I'm Right Down to It, I think it's sung by Miles. Oh, and Rock and Roll's a Vicious Game. Rock and Roll's a Vicious Game, actually, when the album was released, that was the first single released in Canada, and it did reasonably well. It's still played quite a bit today. And up to the time when he passed and was still touring with the band, Rock and Roll is a Vicious Game was a staple in his concerts, and the band that still tours today still plays that song.
Yeah.
So that would be my favorite for this particular year. And
I've got a couple to talk about more. So, but that's all right.
I got one other I do want to bring up. One that I missed in my previous show, but after you're done.
But I must say that Brian Greenway, when he came into April Wine, I think that was the cherry on top. Changed everything when Brian got in the band.
Well, it was a new sound. It was a harder rocking sound. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a classic lineup. All right. My next one I'm going to go with Devo. Question: are we not men? We are Devo 1978, of course. Brian Eno produced it. This is considered one of their greatest works, of course, though I like all the Warner Brothers things. Not a big fan of Shout because of the digital synths, but anything with analog synths and Devo, I'm good. Came out of Akron, Ohio. Starts off with Uncontrollable Urge, energetic. The guitars are just absolutely out of control. And, Mark Mothersbaugh, his vocals on here are just very urgent sounding, very kind of upsetting. But this also has their version of I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Now, when they did this track, they had to get clearance. They got clearance from Mick Jagger, who heard the version of it, and he thought it was absolutely brilliant. He totally gave them the stamp of approval to do it, and it's great.
I remember seeing them perform that song on the TV show Fridays.
Yep.
And I remember me and my friends watching, going like, "Who are these guys? What is this that they're doing?"
Mick Jagger loved that version, but it's got a lot of classic Devo tracks. Mongoloid, Jocko Homo, Gut Feeling, Come Back Johnny, Sloppy, Shrivel Up. It's great. Got mixed reviews when it came out because think about when this came out in 78, there really wasn't much like this anywhere. It's kind of avant-garde. I mean, it's kind of polarizing. Now we kind of listen to it and go, oh yeah. But then, pretty different.
Oh, no, it was different.
It was different. That was one of my picks. My next pick, let me find my list. I'm going to go with, okay, here we go. I don't have to talk much about this, but Blondie, Parallel Lines. Mm-hmm. Come on. That's where Blondie finally got their due. They'd been, playing in clubs, playing at CBGBs. They had several albums before, but when Heart of Glass hit, it was a disco masterpiece. And I think it's some of their best work. I think this is probably their best album, no doubt. But yeah, Blondie, Parallel Lines, great. Dave, you said you had another one you wanted to talk about, and then I have one more, and then I'll just...
Yeah, well, just one that I missed on another show.
Okay.
As I said, when we prepare for these shows, I look up what albums were released, and then sometimes things get by me. And I dug up this today and I said, oh my God, I never even talked about this album, the Buggles. So what are they known for? They're known for being the first band played on MTV for Video Killed the Radio Star. But actually, I believe this might be the only album they released as the Buggles. But it's a darn good album.
There's 2 Buggles albums.
Okay, well, this is the one that I have, and it has all kinds of cool songs on it. Actually, the very first song called Living in the Plastic Age is a fantastic song. There's a song called Elstree that I really quite like. The song Clean Clean, And yeah, as I said, I found this today, and I said, oh, when it should have been talked about in the 1979 or 1980 show, I probably would have included it. So just wanted to, the last show we did, I said, oh, I forgot about the records. Well, I forgot about the Buggles. So
Hey, no big deal.
there
Mention
you
them
go.
here. Fits right in. All right, my last one I want to mention real quick is, of course, I bought this at Peaches, one of those trips. Dad, can you run me to Columbus? A lot of times I had an uncle that lived in Worthington, so a lot of times we could go visit in Worthington, and I could get my dad or my parents to take me to Peaches while we were down there. Um, but I'm going to go with Wings London Town 1978, seventh studio album by Wings. Kind of a transitional record. It's a pretty mellow. They recorded this on a yacht in the Virgin Islands, but they also recorded it at Abbey Road in London. It's kind of laid back. Some people criticize it for that. I love it. I think it's absolutely a wonderful record. Big track on here was With a Little Luck, which was a pretty big hit. I think it got up to, I'm looking, well, I don't know where it got, but it was on the Billboard Top 100. Super track, a standout single as far as I'm concerned. And then the title track, London Town, very mellow, reflective. I'm carrying. Oh my God, beautiful. Probably one of my favorite tracks. Acoustic track that just shows Paul McCartney in all of his best. But again, there's not a weak track on here as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's a little mellow, but hey, Paul does mellow good. I have no problem with it. There is a Denny Lane track on here, Deliver Your Children, which I think's phenomenal. Morse Moose and the Gray Goose, excellent. Another track that was recorded for this is Girls' School that came out on the flip side. Was that on London Town or was that on Moloch and Tyre? I can't remember. But Moloch and Tyre, these are all in the same period. Of course, Moloch and Tyre wasn't on this record, and Girls' School wasn't it, but Girls' School rocks hard. I like it. I don't have any problem with this record. I think it's a great album in the Wings Paul McCartney catalog, and that's really all I have to say to that. But that's my last choice.
Yeah, I quite like that album too. It'd probably be ranked, I'd say, number 12 or 13 of that year. But when we did a show on our favorite Beatles songs done post Beatles, London Town, I remember, was like top 5 for me. But
Right.
we'd have to
I
check
love
back.
it.
But I
love it.
Yeah.
But I'm looking through my list, and it just goes to show me the only track on here that didn't come to me was Devo, Are We Not Men? That came later. But all these other and Blondie Parallel Lines, even though I was aware of it. Devo and Blondie, those are one of those records that kind of I took in later that I really kind of thought were absolutely brilliant later in life. But all the other ones are from my impressions from when I was a kid. So it is what it is, you know. So is that all you got, Dave? Anything else?
That's all I got.
Cool. All right. So this has just been a fun exercise looking at our favorite albums from 1978. What is our next? We're kind of going all over the place. We have yet to talk about what we're going to tackle next, but what do you think we should tackle next?
77?
Let's do 77.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going 77. I was actually, sounds good to me.
We'll do 77. It's a fun exercise. It's like traveling in a time machine and going back to when I was a kid. So I love it. All right, we'll be doing 1977 next. Dave, thanks for coming on. What's up on your channel that you originally launched? Is there anything else you want to talk about while you're here?
Yeah, well, we got the Sound of Soundtracks going. We've already got 3 shows up. Slowly building up an audience. Grant's been on one, and hey, maybe he's going to be on another one real soon.
No doubt. All right, Dave, thanks for doing it. We'll see everybody back on the show 1977. That'll be coming up in September. I'll be in contact. We'll get that booked. All right, everybody, please like, subscribe. Please check out Dave's channel. I'll leave the link below. Please subscribe, give him some love. Go over there, make some comments. If you like my channel, you'll love his channel. So, and I'm over there, for God's sakes. Actually, I have a link to the show that we did down below on my YouTube page. So check it out. You can get the link from there if you want. So
That was
anyway,
the very first show.
very first show. So anyway, we will see you. Keep it real, and we'll be back. What's next in the warehouse? God, I don't know. You know I never know. But probably this. All right. We'll see everybody. Dave, thank you. What a great discussion. Love talking music with you. And everybody, we'll see you.